I can't guarantee.
We can't guarantee who's going to be alive in 2 weeks when this draft starts. We've got a 49ers draft roundtable. Jason Aponte, Steph Sanchez talking why Mel Kiper's mocking who to the Niners and what this draft strategy is for San Francisco coming at you right now. All right, thanks everybody for jumping in live. Overtime with Brian Peacock, brand new channel. I gotta ask everybody, hit that subscribe button. Trying to get that first 1,000 subscribers here. We launched last week. Overtime, it's OT because it goes off topic. OT because sometimes I don't have time for everything I want to do on Locked On 49ers. Daily on the Locked On Podcast Network, me and Croc talking it up. Croc talks a lot, so sometimes there's not enough time to get into what I want to get into, and sometimes we don't have enough time to get into some of the guests and talk 49ers football with folks like Steph Sanchez at Steph49K, Jason Aponte at Jason Aponte, whole bunch of numbers on Twitter. I'm excited to get into this conversation. Appreciate you guys jumping in here, and yeah, hit that subscribe button, hit the like button. Come join me often here on OT with BP, having fun on this new channel. It's a loose channel. There's no rules here. And we're simulcasting this thing, right, guys? I think it's the first time I've done the old simulcast. Tell the folks where they can find your stuff.
I'm at Steph49K, pretty much every social media platform. Well, not every, but, the big ones, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. You find the Nick Bosa impersonations there. So that's where you can find me.
Yeah, and Jason Aponte, it's really easy on YouTube, and make sure you guys subscribe to my guy Brian's new channel, man. You guys are gonna love it, and you know that he does such good work. So make sure you guys do that.
I was gonna say, I feel like I'm on a radio show here. Like, hi mom, like when that intro, that was fire. I like it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Look, I had to throw some rock and roll. That was actually my old intro before we, went big time on my other podcast. And it's a little rock and roll vibe. Get the mood right before we get into some of these conversations here. I think we got. By the way, I just want to say, Steph's probably best hair in 49ers content creation media land. Aponte maybe second. And I'm disappointed. He's got the flip lid, no hair, because I actually got a haircut yesterday because I didn't want to come in here with the hat and be some schlub because I knew who my guests were going to be. And the big time game that was going to be on the screen with me. And I can't compete there, but I wanted to at least not go hat, which I usually do 9 times out of 10 on the pod. So appreciate you for screwing that up, Aponte.
Yeah, I mean, leave it to me to not get the memo. But honestly, I'm just waiting before I leave to go to the draft to get a haircut. I think it's a little bit better to wait a little bit longer. Plus, inflation's real, man. This $50 haircut thing a week thing, it's not gonna fly. I just don't know how I'm gonna keep this up.
That is rough. Yeah, that's why I'm not much of I'm not big on the grooming. Throw a hat on. Let's go. Let's get out the door and start the day. I actually want to lead with you, Aponte, because you were on the conference call with Mel Kiper, right? The NFL draft conference call, talking about his latest mock draft and why who he had to the San Francisco 49ers. For those of you who did not see, it was a 2-round mock draft. He had Washington right tackle Roger Rosengarten going to the 49ers at pick 31 in the second round. Andrew Phillips, a corner out of the University of Kentucky. And what kind of intel did you get from Mel Kiper on his mock draft?
So essentially, everyone's going to ask what the thought process is with him. But for me, it felt like in his description, in his mock draft, it talks about how he doesn't allow any sacks in 1,158 pass blocking snaps. But it really it ends with he has familiarity with San Francisco star Christian McCaffrey's dad. And then we find out that he's working out with Joe Staley. So what I asked was, I just wanted to know are you hearing something? Are you reading tea leaves? Or is this really a fit? And essentially, he says that, they can look to upgrade at the spot at right tackle, but he really likes the kid. 6'5", 308, 4.92, and a 30 vertical. Numbers don't mean a heck of a lot. He said he remembers Jason Fabini ran like a 5'5", heck of a career. And he said that it was more about the type of athlete that he was. But he also went on to explain that he believes that Rosengarten isn't a candidate to flip over to left tackle, that he has to stay primarily a right tackle. He doesn't see the skill set for him to go over there. But kind of like how you and I were talking off of line, like before we started, this one really doesn't feel like something that he's watching film and saying that fits. It really just feels like something that he's hearing. And that's kind of what I was trying to poke at, but he's too good at media to give that right away.
Yeah, and look, Steph, you've been sort of in charge of keeping track of what the 49ers are doing and what they're working on behind the scenes. You know, like you have this amazing ability to know who all the scouts are, and you're like, oh yeah, that's the dude from that's a dude with this title, and he's over here at this school, while this dude with this title's over here at this school, and you can pick them out from a photograph or from a quick video of some of these pro days and stuff. And when it comes to Mel Kiper's mock and with what's going on with the 49ers and how they really trust certain coaches to give them the right information, how they trust certain people. You know, it was Arizona State, it was South Carolina, and they go back to the well, and you know they trust family. There's some nepotism going on in the building, right? There's Kubiaks and there's Shanahan's and there's McCaffrey's, and do you put any credence into the Joe Staley thing with Roger Rosengarten? Do you put any credence into the Ed McCaffrey coaching him in high school thing, as far as maybe even drafting him high, overdrafting him, or even going down the rabbit hole of Brandon Rice, Luke McCaffrey, Frank Gore Jr. as prospects for the 49ers?
I'm not as heavy on the, legacy draft picks for the 49ers as maybe other fans are, but this one might have legs. I would say that last year, Matthew Bergeron was someone who Joe Staley, worked out with or was training with. And I felt like there was some connection with the 49ers there. They had met with him, I believe, at the combine last year. So I kind of thought that would be a thing. But this year, I haven't heard anything about Rosengarten, being connected to the 49ers in any way. Now, that doesn't mean that there hasn't been any contact throughout this process. That just means there hasn't been any reports. So it could mean they're keeping some things very close to the vest, which usually could indicate some interest, right? I mean, the 49ers do like to move in silence. I do always say, like, the 30 visits do give a pretty decent indication of like who they're interested in the draft. So once those get rolling, we'll maybe know a little bit more if Rosengarten is included in that. But this could be something they're trying to keep under wraps for a reason. And I know, currently Rosengarten's probably like a day 2 kind of guy. As far as, reaching for someone, the 49ers have shown if they like someone, they don't care about anyone else's value. They go by how they value that player. And if that means reaching by the media standards, they do not care. So if Rosengarten's that kind of guy, they would have no problem doing that, I think.
Yeah, and you mentioned 30 visits, and I want to get a little deeper into that in a second because I know you're keeping track. But it's interesting because the last time the 49ers drafted a tackle in the first round, they didn't show any interest. And they were trying to throw people off on Mike McGlinchey. There was no 30 visit. There was no, I think they might have like not even sent anybody to the pro day or something crazy like that, right? Like they went as far away from him as possible before the draft. And then there was that overnight trade and they shipped off Trent Williams after that pick of Mike McGlinchey as the future right tackle for the team. So maybe it's one of those. But in recent years, Steph, you just kind of talked about it. There's been a lot of correlation with the guys that they've brought in on those 30 visits to who they've actually drafted.
Yeah, there has been, but you make a good point. Like, I don't believe the 49ers had anyone at Trey Lance's pro day, right? Like, if I'm remembering correctly. So I don't remember.
Yeah,
but
that was such a weird, that was COVID off season. And like, apparently they met with him like 100 times on Zoom. And
yeah, that was a really weird. That was a really weird,
strange and screwed up.
And they were drawing up plays for Mac Jones on the plane after, right? Whatever the hell.
It was
whatever was happening on that plane.
It was literally,
but
there was too much time on everyone's hands. They talked themselves into something. It was the one offseason you probably don't want to go spend a million draft picks because everything was incomplete that offseason.
Yeah. And basically what I was going to say is that, I almost feel like the 49ers try to conceal who they're interested in so much that it kind of tells you who they might be interested in. But then at the same time, there's so many prospects in the draft that it's really hard to say. But, sometimes there's some where it's a little suspicious. We haven't heard that they have interest in this guy. It's suspicious that to this point there's only been one reported offensive lineman who has a 30 visit with 49ers, right? And that's Caden Wallace. Given that it's a pretty significant need, we would say, for the 49ers, I'd say.
No doubt. That's a huge need for the 49ers. So if they're not doing 30 visits with offensive linemen, and I think one of the biggest things you can tell, and not just from the 30 visits, but prospect visits and the combine stuff and the pro days and all of that. The big one in last year, it was pretty clear. It was like they were meeting with every tight end, and you knew they were interested in tight ends. You knew it was a need, and they made it pretty obvious they were doing all of their due diligence on all the tight ends, and they ended up drafting 2 of the guys. And so, I think linebacker was one of those last year. It was really clear. So from what you've been able to gather, and you are the foremost expert on this, what positions are they looking at the most in this draft?
Definitely think secondary is something that the 49ers are definitely looking at. A decent number of corners. They still can't stay away from defensive linemen. Like that is still very much something they're always doing their due diligence on, a number of different guys. And you mentioned the combine. That was probably where we did see the most indication that the 49ers, did talk to a lot of offensive linemen there. There just hasn't been anything after that to indicate. So yeah, I would say those are probably the big ones. And then also wide receiver is another position that I think, the 49ers definitely going to look to target in this draft. Now, one position that, people are kind of seeing as a need these days is tight end. And I would say, based on who I've seen them have reported interest in this draft process, there hasn't been a lot of the high end tight ends like that you would think. But then again, this isn't a very strong tight end class. So based on that, I kind of think they would go tight end in the later rounds if I had a guess. But again, maybe they're just trying to, steer us away from thinking they'll take tight end early.
It kind of adds up because Aponte, this is what I was going to go to next, and that ties in perfectly because they've been looking at these. They're short-term contracts, so you're not going to change your entire course of your franchise because you sign Eric Sauber to a 1-year deal, or they signed the offer sheet with the Brock Wright from Detroit. But it does feel like they're signing guys because they're planning not to draft them early. That's what it feels like with tight end, and it's starting to feel that way at cornerback now. And maybe after all this interest and all the work they've been doing at corner, they found out, man, maybe we don't like the corners that much. And the 2 guys we like are not going to be there for us in the first round. And maybe we've got other plans. And so the guys we like aren't going to be there for us. So we're going to go get Isaac Yiadom. They signed Rock Ya-Sin today. Aponte, am I crazy for thinking that it's less likely that they're going to be targeting tight end and cornerback early in this draft?
No, I don't think it's crazy at all. I do think that they've actually looked into it. And this has kind of been the way that I've been looking at the Brandon Staley, Nick Sorensen thing. And even when they were going through their defensive coordinator search, everyone that was a candidate was a secondary guy. So it feels like there's a bit of a philosophy change coming where they want to prioritize corners and coverage a little bit more. But initially, when you dive into these guys, you start to think, okay, let's identify one in the draft. But then you go through the process and you're probably like, I feel a little bit more safe if we bring in a steady guy like Rock Ya-Sin and Yiadom, and it can keep Lenoir in the slot. I think that's really the crux of what they're trying to do, is to try to keep Lenoir in the slot because he's performed very well there and improved so much. I think where we'll see something maybe is maybe not cornerback, safety. And I think that's kind of where the crux of the whole, they're looking at Blackman and Justin Simmons is there. What about Hufanga, right? Like the problem is, and Steph and I talk about this all the time, is trying to win with impact players that are cheap. And you've got to try to find those in the draft. So if you can find a guy, because it certainly seems like Tashawn Gibson's not going to be there. Jair Brown seems to be slotted in as a starter. But what do you feel about Hufanga? What about if you have to pay him? So I think that's kind of where we are. I wouldn't be shocked if they went with a safety in this draft at all. And then with the tight end thing, Charlie Warner leaves, and obviously he's a blocking tight end, but them consistently being tied to other tight ends, I think more says what they think about Braden Willis and Cam Latu. And obviously, right, like it's a little bit early with Cam Latu because he hasn't taken a snap or anything like that. But we had all heard the whispers about the drops, and the way he was kind of struggling. But I wouldn't be shocked if the 49ers, double back at the end of this draft and try to get a tight end as well, too. So I think it's like twofold. I think they're definitely in the market to find someone who can replace Warner. But I also think that they're telling you what they feel about Cam Latu and Braden Willis going into this season as well, too. That, maybe they're not out on them, but they're not as confident that they'll take the leap that people think they will.
It's a good point here by Invader 49er. The 49ers haven't put high end draft resources, and really, as far as money, they did sign Jimmy Ward, and then they brought in Charvarius Ward. But especially at safety, and look, I trust John Lynch with safety. Like he's nailed it every single time. They've had good safety play no matter what they've done there, and they haven't put tons of dollars and resources in. And maybe that's the plan, is just to kind of keep filtering in rookie contract players and short-term, cheaper veterans if the market allows it. So maybe we shouldn't expect defensive backs to be a high priority in the draft for the 49ers.
I think it's fair. And again, Rocky Sin was very solid last season in limited snaps with the Baltimore Ravens, had a high draft grade when he was coming out. And I think they're betting on Gideon possibly duplicating what he did last season with the Saints on the outside. More that that's not going to be the exception in his career, that maybe he's found something. And then again, when you pair that with Sorensen being a secondary guy, having played secondary in the NFC and in the NFL, and then Staley with being so good with the two high looks and being able to craft a game plan for secondary, I think it all kind of lines up for them to think that they might have found something in Yidium.
And here's the thing: is like the room's starting to get pretty full. Like you got half a dozen corners, but pre-draft they drafted Darrell Luter in the 5th round last year, outside corner. Ambry Thomas, outside corner. Sam Womack, 5th rounder, looked really good as a rookie, and then all of a sudden disappeared. Got doghoused, it looks like, and maybe they didn't like what they saw from him in the slot. And Richard Sherman said that maybe he thought it was probably his run support didn't really work great at nickel, so now he's an outside guy. Then they signed Isaac Yiadom, outside corner. Rock Ya-Sin, outside corner. Deommodore Lenoir is the nickel. Period. Right? Like that's what they're doing. How could that not be the plan right now? And if that's the plan, then they're pretty full at outside cornerback right now with the numbers they have going into camp. So, or at least going into the draft and potentially OTAs. And again, those aren't Yiadom and Rock Ya-Sin. You cut them tomorrow, right? Those aren't long-term deals. Those aren't big money deals. But they're up to something pre-draft. And if you read between the lines, it really feels like corner and tight end are those positions they're just trying to get set. They did a lot of work on defensive line, spending some money on a couple of ends. Leonard Floyd, Vitor Gross-Matos, Shadow 49er, liked him coming out. Hasn't really developed into the guy I hoped he would be as far as a pass rusher off the end, but really fits the prototype of a long, big end that can come in and rush from the interior at points in the draft. Tells me that they're gearing up to draft an offensive lineman essentially at 31. I don't know if it's Roger Rosengarten, but I'd be shocked at this point if that's not the plan. And it really does feel like the plan. Maybe it could be a D tackle, could still be a defensive lineman. You should never take that off the board at all for the San Francisco 49ers. So that's the vibe I'm getting with all this, with what the 49ers are doing. Steph, throughout this process, have you found a prospect that you love for the San Francisco 49ers? Is there a certain draft strategy you like for the 49ers early on in the draft as sort of like, here's the playbook if I'm John Lynch going into this thing in a couple weeks?
I like them going best player available. So and another way to look at all the moves they've made and how they've kind of cover their ass, you can say, with defensive line, with the secondary, or in particular the corners. I think that sets them up for best player available. Now, if the best player available on the board is an offensive lineman, hell yeah, like let's get them. But I also think they wouldn't be afraid to, take a corner if, Cooper DeJean or McKinstry was there, right, at 31, or even it close enough in their range, right? Like, because we're just talking about corners, but maybe it's not that big a need this year. But then you look at 2025 and it's a huge need. So it's a bigger need for 2025 than it is for 2024. But we talk about how important this draft is, not just for this season, but like, your foundation for the turnover, basically. And so if you can get a foundational piece at 31, you got to go for it. So no matter what the position is. So I hope they go best player available, honestly, with that first pick at 31. And then, just let the draft kind of come to you. I I feel like the 49ers do reach a lot with certain positions, certain players that maybe the consensus isn't really high on. Uh sometimes it has worked for them, sometimes it doesn't. But I guess I just want them to go for the most sure thing they can find in this draft.
I'm with you, man. Best player available. And it feels like one of the big reasons why they've been so good in later rounds and not as good in the earlier rounds of the draft, Nick Bosa and Brandon Ayuk aside, is because they're kind of chasing need. And that's not a good strategy early in the NFL draft, is to draft for need. And then when they go later in the draft and they're just drafting people who are wired and think they play the style of football that they want 49ers to play, then they've started hitting on those guys. And even those late third round picks, and the 49ers again have number 94 in this draft, a lot of those picks have been, there's been the running backs, and they're like, we need to have bigger running backs. And it turns out, no, actually the more explosive running backs are the guys, they're the ones that are working out for you, Kyle. So stay there with your running back game. And then Ambry Thomas worked out really well. Tarvarius Moore was like a height, weight, speed guy. So they've kind of tried to hit the height, weight, speed home run late in the third round as well. And that hasn't worked out great for them. So I don't know what the answer is, Jason, but how do you see this thing? What's your strategy overall for the 49ers early in this draft?
I always love best player available, right? When you try to plug a hole after trading DeForest Buckner for a high pick, and you go with a defensive tackle, and you allow the Tampa Bay Bucks to jump you for Tristan Wirfs, you start to lose out on these players that could be filling in holes and everything. But I have a tough time not thinking that it's going to be Jordan Morgan from Arizona. And I understand, we love buzzwords during the draft process. Short arms, they scare you to death. I mean, for God's sakes, Brian, the guy's got T-Rex arms. He'll never succeed in this league and ever be a starter. Like, that short arms thing, he has like a quarter of an inch or 3/4 of an inch shorter arms than like the guy that you really want to have. But I think Jordan Morgan starts to become more and more of a guy that you look at that'll end up being a starter and doesn't have to be somebody that you throw the expectations of a Mike McGlinchey on when you take him with the number 9 pick. So if Jordan Morgan turns out to be a 7 or 8 year starter, not a guy who's an all-pro, but he's a starter and he's very solid, and then you have Cole McKivitz to kind of hang around in the background just in case he doesn't develop. You still have somebody who's actually played a lot of snaps, who can actually play guard, who can actually play left tackle in a pinch. I'm starting to think more and more that Jordan Morgan is the guy that they're actually looking at, because I start to think that Amarius Mims is too big of a risk for them. I think that's too, like, that one is like the swing. That's literally a home run or a strikeout. Like, I don't see any middle part with him. Like, it's either going to be that he's going to be this physically gifted freak, or he's just going to be a guy who becomes unplayable. And I don't know if the 49ers can try that again in the first round with any type of player. Then you look at, the kid from BYU, all those guys are going to be gone, I think, eventually, right? So I do think that it ends up being Jordan Morgan at 31. That's the guy that I keep mocking to them as I go through the first round.
When it comes to arm length, I've come full circle on that. It's pretty wild. So Jordan Morgan's 32 and 7/8 or something like that. So just an eighth of an inch under 33 inches. There's, I think, either 0 or 1 starting offensive tackles in the NFL currently that are under 33 inches. And back in the day, people made a lot of, remember it was like the Alex Smith big or small hands thing. And it was like, come on, hand size, arm length. What are we even doing here in the NFL draft? I remember reading old draft reports talking about bubble butts, for defensive linemen. It's like, what? It's kind of creepy. What's going on right now? And the more I do this, the more it's like, dang, you need that power. You need that base. You do need that bubble if you're going to be rooting people out. You need that leverage. It's important. You need to be able to get your hands on the guy in front of you before he can get his hands on you. You need big, strong hands. And then you see prospects like Darius Robinson, 35-inch arms, big, strong hands, controlling the offensive lineman in front of him, disengaging. And it's really important. And when it comes to offensive tackles, the league believes it's important. And there's been so many prospects, and it's just time and time and time again, straight to guard. And I do think in the NFL, Jordan Morgan goes straight to guard. As good as this tape looks, as smooth as he looks at tackle, it's for some teams, and I think for most teams, it's just a non-starter. You're sub 33-inch arms. You're not playing tackle for us. We saw it with Skoronski last year. He's the best offensive lineman in the draft. Straight to guard. Not even like, let's see a fail at tackle first. So that's an interesting one. And when you start to get late in round 1 at pick 31, you start seeing Roger Rosengarten, 33.5, by the way, which so he's still like, he's acceptable. There's some guys with 33.5, but there's not many. Most of the offensive linemen in the NFL, their starting tackles are 34 or more. And that's kind of the cutoff that a lot of teams want. And there's some 33s out there, but you've got to have some really good ability, some special ability otherwise to for a team to even allow you to try to play tackle at this point in the NFL, which is pretty wild. That's why I keep settling on Suamataia out of BYU, just because he hits all of those. And look, he's not as clean of a he's not that as finished of a prospect as Jordan Morgan is right now. And Niner Fanatic Pod in the chat says, does Kingsley Suamataia go before 31? I don't think he does. It's possible because of that very reason, because what I was getting at pick 31, it's like, okay, you're either going to get a guy who played college tackle, but gosh, teams don't want, he's not going to stick there. So now you're looking at an interior guy. You're looking at Barton. You're looking at Morgan. Or maybe it's a guy like Amarius Mims, who teams just don't know what the heck to do with him. You're not going to get a super clean starting day one offensive tackle, most likely at pick 31 most years. Maybe this year is a deep enough class where a guy gets close and you trade up, or maybe somebody is there at 31. But that's kind of what we're looking at with all these prospects. And I keep coming back to Suamataia because every time you go through it, it's like, man, he does have the long arms and the big hands and strong hands. And he's got the athleticism. But, third-year sophomore, he just turned 21 years old. He's just a pup, but has experience. 1 year starting left tackle, 1 year starting right tackle. And you can see the tools. He has tools to be a starting offensive tackle, and he's got some work to do, so there's some boom or bust there. And so, and Mims, I agree with you, Jason, by the way. Amarius Mims, if he's at 31, you have to take him. But I hope he's gone before that, so the Niners don't have to take him, because he scares the crap out of me with that bust potential, because 8 games, injuries, injured again at the combine. It's a bad combination, and teams are so tackle needy. But, man, he looks good at 6'7" and 340 pounds. You're not supposed to move like that and wear 340 pounds that well. And, look, Aponte knows that we got some size on this podcast. Steph, I don't know how tall you are. I've stood next to you.
I am the Jordan Morgan of the show today.
Okay. Shorter arms for Steph. I'm about 34. I think I would pass there. I'm a little light in the pants to be able to play offensive line. I did measure myself, though, during the combine this year, 6'0", so 6'4" and an 8. And I think Aponte's right around that area, 6'5" if you count the hair. So, but it's so hard to find human beings that are as tall as Aponte or I, or taller, and 100 pounds heavier and athletic. Right. Like, you don't see them walking around Target. You don't go to the grocery store and see them. You go around the grocery store, you see guys that are built like running backs and safeties. You just don't see offensive tackles with all the requisite length and size and athleticism that you need. And so that's kind of why I like Suamataia. I see a lot of people, mocking him more in the second round range. And Kuiper actually had him the last pick in the second round. I'd prefer Suamataia over Rosengarten myself, but I'm kind of, betting on upside there with Suamataia, who, by the way, is Penei Sewell's cousin.
Yep.
And their athletic testing is identical. It's wild. Same height, same arm length, same hand size, 31 versus 30 bench press reps, natural strength in that family. Suamataia ran a tick faster in the 40-yard dash. So, I'm hoping you can squint and see a right tackle that looks something like Penei Sewell. That's why Suamataia is my guy. And I'm hoping for a tackle, because there's a ton of good interior guys. It's a deep class. You can find a guard. You can find a center. I'm really trying to find a tackle at 31. So that's why I could see maybe you artificially push Rosengarten up. But for me, my guy is Suamataia for that reason. And, maybe even a trade back would make sense, or a trade up, guys. And I want to ask that question next. Steph, what do you think? Is this a trade up draft? Is it a trade down and then trade up later? Is it a trade up multiple times? Is it a collect picks? Because what you said about cost control players is really important. We didn't see the Trey Lance draft picks. We didn't miss those immediately. You start to miss those 2-3 years after the picks happen, which is coming up in the next couple of years. The 49ers need players at positions that start at positions that get paid a lot in the NFL. Offensive tackle being one of those, defensive ends. The 49ers can't stay expensive everywhere, especially if they have to start paying an expensive quarterback. So is maybe trade down the plan to collect the most amount of picks and have the most dart throws and try to build the depth back up on this football team? Are you going up? Are you going down? What do you think the 49ers should do there? Do you like to stand pat at 31?
I mean, I definitely look if they're looking to get like a day one starting, or at least a day one competing tackle, then I kind of think they would need to trade up to get a sure thing. But I think they would have to trade up, into the early 20s, maybe even the teens. And then at that point, you're giving up a lot of draft capital to be able to do that. I don't know if that's necessarily worth it. Again, I like staying pat, take best player available at 31. I do entertain the idea of trading back, though, especially given the fact that Suamataia has been, the closer we get into the draft, I feel like he's more seen as a second round guy. And I saw that Dane Brugler had him as a second round grade as well. So then I'd feel a little more confident that you could trade back and still be able to get him. And that would be a really great pool, in the second round. So, that could be something, because I mean, especially at 31, there's probably going to be some teams that are trying to get into the leap teams that are in the early going of the second round. And so I'm sure the 49ers are going to get a lot of calls there. So they might be tempted and still feel confident enough that they could get their guy and get a decent enough tackle by still trading back. So I wouldn't be mad at it. But, I think for some reason, the most likely thing I could see happening is them just staying pat.
The quarterbacks is interesting too. It kind of goes along the lines of Amarius Mims and some other prospects. Cooper DeJean, I'm not as high on as other people are for the 49ers. I like him. I just think he's an inside player more than a pure outside corner, which is totally fine as well. But I kind of hope a team before the 49ers picks him pushes someone else back. I hope someone else picks up Mims and pushes somebody else back. I kind of hope a quarterback or two goes before the 49ers, or someone wants to trade up with the 49ers at 31 to get one of those quarterbacks, and maybe push somebody else back, or give the 49ers a little boost there with some added inventory, and then maybe go up again later. Aponte, how do you see this thing? You going up in this draft? You going down in this draft? I totally agree with you, Steph, that if they're trying to find especially if it's like, okay, we want a guy who's going to compete week one, starting right tackle, you probably got to go up and get your guy.
Yeah, and the thing is, you're not going to be able to sign all these picks that you have, right? I mean, it's 10, 11. You're probably not going to have enough space on the roster anyway. So what do? You probably use this for ammunition to move up, but it has to be for someone that they're so sure on, that they know is going to be a player, right? And what does that line up with? Is it a Kool-Aid McKinstry that that you have a very good chance of just putting him out there and starting him? And again, the signing of Rock Ya-Sin and Yidim, it doesn't mean that they'll be on the roster, of the 53. So that's not necessarily something that's going to stop them from getting there. But it has to be someone that they're absolutely sure about. And who knows? Is there a philosophy change with this team and they really want secondary, and you find out that Kool-Aid's falling because of the injury and the whispers at the combine about effort and all that stuff, which Deion Sanders kind of blew up today about people throwing out misinformation to tank everybody's draft stock and things like that. That's just, at this point, it feels more like the 49ers have more ammunition than ever to move up, because you're not going to sign all of these picks that you have as well too. And it's not like you can just put them in a G League or something like that. So I think when you load up on all these comp picks, when you're continuing to get them over and over, why not in the first round look at how the board goes? And Brian, I think you said it, the last time that we spoke when you were on my show, everybody has a target in the draft, and everybody thinks the draft's going to come out whatever way they do, right? So the 49ers may have an offensive tackle in mind, but they also have Colton McKivitz to fall back on, and they still have all those guys just in case it doesn't play out. But there's always somebody who's going to throw a monkey wrench into something where they're going to take somebody way too early. The board gets completely out of whack. And now someone who you never thought would be in your range is there all of a sudden. So the flexibility that the 49ers have afforded themselves with the signings, the depth signings everywhere, bringing back the offensive line, it puts them in a spot where they can do anything. And I think that's really what's exciting about it. Do you have to trade up? I don't know, because I don't know what the board's going to look like, but you have to keep yourself flexible in case somebody falls into your range and you're like, I never thought he was going to get here. We've got to go get him right now, as opposed to just sitting and waiting and just saying, well, we know how the board's going to play out. Very rarely does the draft end up the way that anybody believes it will.
Yeah, and if they stick at 31, they kind of are at the mercy of the board in front of them. And I think there's going to be a really good player at 31 if they stay there, but it just might not be the position they want it to be or the player they want it to be. And they have to be prepared to make that pick of picking the best guy, which goes back to the best player available thing. And I hope that's what they do, and they don't force it if that player's not there. And then maybe that's when you go up in the second round, maybe. And I kind of feel like that's maybe the play right now is moving up because of how expensive it could be. Now, I talked about how they've missed. Like, how confident are we that they're going to nail pick 94, right? Late third round pick, just go up and get Fuaga. You know what I mean? Like, if it costs the third round pick, if you can go up to pick 21 and he's still there or something like that, if a third rounder is enough to do that, go up to, I can totally see that. But maybe the best strategy is going to be staying at 31, allowing yourself to draft whatever the best player that falls to you is, and then going up in round 2 to attack the player that you want that best fits your team there for a need. And I think the 49ers could get up a nice bit in the second round and get that sort of a player. And so I'm thinking of, like, if you like Jordan Morgan in round 1, wouldn't it be even better if you got Chop Robinson in round 1 and then you trade up and got Jordan Morgan in round 2, right? Or Kingsley Suamataia in round 2 and you got Kool-Aid in round 1, or Cooper DeJean. Pick your favorite player that could kind of slide in 31 and then go attack that last offensive lineman that you like maybe in round 2. And I wouldn't mind even if staying pat at round 1 and round 2 and going up in round 3 and being in the top 75 picks or so, because I think that really is the strength of this draft. Because I think this is one of the weaker day 3s and one of the stronger top 75s we've seen in a while. And maybe it would behoove the 49ers to try to get up and just strike 3 times in the top 75 if they could. But I think you got to go upward at some point, and maybe even go back before you go up. So maybe you drop back to pick 37, and whoever's comes up to get Michael Penix or Bo Nix or whatever it is at the end of round 1, and then you got an extra pick to use to package to get up, and then you go boom, boom in round 2 or something like that. I don't know. I could see that happening. This could go a number of ways, and I'm just excited, guys, that the 49ers have a first-round pick and the 49ers have a second-round pick. Like, this is pretty amazing. They actually have an opportunity to get somebody who could be a difference-making player for them early in the draft, and we haven't seen that in a while.
Yeah, sick of looking at all these guys hoping that they'll be around in the third round.
Last year was brutal trying to scout prospects for the draft and figure out which way they could go. And It's funny because I watched Jair Brown. I said, ooh, 49ers are going to like this guy, Jair Brown, Croc. And Croc on Locked On 49ers, he never got around to watching Jair Brown before the draft. And then the Niners took him. I was like, see, I told you, Croc, you should have watched Jair Brown. That was my guy. And then we went back and we watched him, and, it was like, his scouting report was a lot like Talanoa Hufanga, and the 49ers like those types of players. And so that I trust John Lynch when it comes to safeties. That's for sure. Is there a non we've talked so much about offensive linemen. What about non-offensive linemen? Anybody you like?
Darius Robinson from Missouri. Yeah. I think there's your, again, if we're talking about this team building from the trenches, they're absolutely going to address the defensive line. Again, I think to your point about gross models is somebody who's like an Omenihu who can rush outside, go inside, right? Like that really works. Leonard Floyd seems to be a 1 or 2 year guy. I think they're kind of telling you that they're not putting their eggs all in the Drake Jackson basket. Also, that's something that isn't going along the way that they wanted. So yeah, I like Darius Robinson from Missouri. I think he's really good. Chop is really interesting, Brian, because he starts to give me the same sort of vibes at times with Mims, because I can see it and I see the burst, and then you don't have the production, and then you have the outrageous, the outrageous combine numbers and everything. But will they be able to look at a guy like Chop who has all the physical gifts, looks like a guy who can get off the ball right away? Will they be able to say no to that, even though he has a range of outcomes that, it's a little bit more boom or bust? But I think Darius Robinson is the guy that I like the most.
I was gonna say the same thing.
All right.
I think he definitely fits like what the 49ers have typically liked in edge rushers. I think another guy that is getting a lot of buzz the closer we get is Disa Isaac. We know the 49ers love their Penn State guys, so that could make a lot of sense for them too. And I like Austin Booker as well. He was someone who at the Senior Bowl, I think definitely increased his buzz out there as well. So um but those are guys. I think Booker's someone who they can get in, maybe day 2. So uh there's a lot of talent I think they can get in later rounds. I like Mo Kamara a lot as well. Someone
Short
they can
king.
get later in the draft. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting guys, and we haven't talked about linebacker yet, but I love Cedric Gray. I think he's someone who would definitely fit the mold of what the 49ers like in linebackers. There's a few nice linebackers, and we haven't talked enough about some of them just because, of course, we don't see it as a huge need for them, and it really isn't. But I think the 49ers always like to bring in at least one via the draft. So, look out for that, I think.
Booker's interesting. It's kind of a similar profile to Drake Jackson. It kind of fits the mold of a guy where, you're trying to find a home run edge rusher, on day 2 that has height, weight, speed, and maybe is missing a little something in development, and see if he can get there. And we haven't seen that yet from Jake Jackson. So maybe they're just tired of waiting for that, and they're going to go D-line again in round 1. So we'll see. And again, like, you're at the mercy of the board and who's going to fall. Invader 49er asked this question about the trades, guys. Here's the offer. It comes in. You call 21 is the Miami Dolphins. And you say, hey, we want to come up here. And they say, all right, 31, 94, and 135. That's your 3rd and 4th round picks this year. That's the later 4th round pick. 49ers have 3 4th rounders. 3rd and a 4th to get from 31 to 21. You say yes, and who you taking?
I say yes, and it's for Kool-Aid. I mean, like, I do it, and it's for Kool-Aid, because then you're getting yourself a guy who, competition concerns none. Went to Alabama. Literally a guy, and just if we're going off vibes and names only, like, how could you not just go for a guy who's named Kool-Aid? But I do like the other one too that's in there, if it is Fuaga, who is there as well too. I just don't know if he makes it past the Raiders. I don't think. But again, this is where you are. Like, this is where you are in what you think is going to happen in the draft. And I think that Kool-Aid could be there at 21, possibly. I think if it gets to that point where he gets to the Eagles, that's when you start to get nervous about him getting taken. But at 21 with the Dolphins, I think they're okay, like, what they have, and you can definitely move up to 21 to go get Kool-Aid for that.
Dolphins have a lack of like mid-round picks too, which is why they might be looking to kind of add some picks, and it could be a place to go up. 49ers obviously know some folks in that building pretty well. Steph, you nix this trade, or are you going to do it?
I think I would do it, of course, if who I like is there. That feels like Mims range to me. So, like, if we're feeling like Mims is a big risk, then probably not. You could go Kool-Aid. I definitely, I'm all board with that. And I mean, while we're talking safeties and maybe the 49ers making a swing for a safety too, Tyler Nubin could be someone they could target if they want to go safety early. But obviously, like, I think there could be a tackle in that range if, Mims isn't the only one left that I would definitely try to target there. What I'm hoping in this draft is that I feel like there will be a run on wide receivers, pretty early. I feel like there's been mixed reports. We get this like every year, right? That there could be like 6 or 7 wide receivers like taken in the first round. If there's like a mini run, maybe that can get some tackles to kind of fall that we weren't really expecting to be in that 20 range, right? And that can make things interesting for the 49ers because like we were talking earlier, hey, we never know how the board is going to fall. If someone who we never thought was going to be there is there, I mean, then you got to start making some calls and seeing if you can make something happen there. So, yeah, I definitely look to explore that trade if, someone I liked was there.
Yeah, Fuaga's my guy, and I think he's the one player I'd probably move up for in this draft. And I think there is a chance that he gets somewhere close to somewhere like 21. And I say that because what happens in these mock drafts, because everyone needs offensive linemen. You go through a mock draft and it's like, what are the needs? Offensive line, tackle, guard, whatever. But just because they need a tackle doesn't mean you just plug any tackle and it's going to fit every team scheme, and what they're looking for. And all these guys are so different. Mims, Fuaga, JC Latham, they've only played right tackle. So if a team wants a left tackle, do they want Fuaga? Are they going to go Olu Fashanu if he's there? Or, obviously Joe Alt's probably going to go in the top 10 at some point. Everyone's got him at pick 7 right now. I've never seen a pick that deep in the draft that has everybody mocking the same player to them in my life. I can't believe how, it's unanimous that Joe Alt goes to the Titans at 7, which means it can't possibly happen, right? But all these guys have some issue. Maybe your arm length's a little short. Maybe you're a guard. Maybe you're right tackle only and a team wants a left tackle. So I think there's a chance that some of these players do fall down a little bit. Very unlikely that your favorite player is going to be there for the 49ers all the way down at 31. But for that reason, I do think there's a possibility for some of these guys to slip just because all these teams' boards are going to be very different and they're going to be looking for very different things. And I do think Fuaga fits Kyle Shanahan to a T. Like, just awesome run blocker. The tape is so fun to watch. He doesn't care as much about pass blocking. Fuaga's pretty good there, but if there was a weakness, it's maybe that. His arm's, again, shorter. It's in the 33-inch range. That's why some teams might look at him at guard, which is why some teams might go a different direction and let him fall a couple of picks. So that's probably the one for me. Ideally, though, I would not move up very far in round 1. And I've been kind of eyeing one of those 4th-round picks. If it costs 1/4, I'm good. And that 1/4 can get you up even higher in round 2 and get even higher in round 3. And so day 2 trade up is where I'm at right now. As far as the player I like that's not an offensive lineman, I like the Robinsons. I like Chop and Darius Robinson. I like Johnny Newton a lot. That's what makes me excited about this draft, because you do a mock, like, one of these players is going to fall. There's going to be a really good player at 31. It just might not be the right position for the 49ers. Which is why, man, if you get chopped and then come back up for a tackle, dude, I'm all about that. I like the idea of trading up on day 2. That's my strategy today. Ask me again tomorrow. I don't know. It might look a lot different at that point. I was going to get into the chat here a little bit more before I let you guys go. Saints trading up for Fuaga. So that's another one. So the Saints, I need a left guy at 14. And we're not trading Ayuk, right?
All right. So I'm glad you said that, because we're literally got to talk about wide receiver. Because if it's not him that's moving, it's Deebo Samuel, right? And like, it feels like there's a parting of ways that's about to happen with one of these guys, right? And Xavier Legette is the guy that everybody is kind of now saying like he fits exactly that. He kind of looks like Ayuk more to me than he does Deebo, if you ask me, like in the way that he gets himself open. Not exactly like straight line speed, but play speed is a lot better. So Legette is going to be somebody that's going to be around probably early 2nd, right? Because it feels like you've got this end part where we believe that the Kansas City Chiefs are going to be all in on a wide receiver, probably like Lad McConkey. If they want speed, Xavier Worthy. Those will be the guys that are going to be there. But Legette feels like a guy that if you can identify him and get him in the 2nd round, then that makes that decision of whatever you have to do next season with Deebo Samuel or Brandon Ayuk, if he's going to play on the 5th, which I doubt. I think he comes back ultimately. I think they find a way to get the extension done. But when you're talking about kicking the can down the road and now you're going to have to pay the quarterback, There's going to be tough decisions that have to be made. So I think we have to talk about wide receiver in this draft because it does feel like there is a breakup coming with Deebo Samuel more than there is Brandon Ayuk, in my opinion.
Give me
I've been saying
Javon
that all
Baker.
along.
Give me Javon Baker.
Okay.
In later rounds. I like Legged's cool. But I feel like the 49ers could get some great value later in the draft with the wide receivers. Like I think it's sneakily deep, right? Like everyone's talking about these, prospects that could go in the first 2 rounds for the wide receivers, and they're nice. But I think there's some sneaky guys later, and Javon Baker's one of those guys. And I feel like he'd be a great number 2 when, Deebo Samuel, moves on from the 49ers. And, I think it'd be a great fit. He's a dog.
That's been my plan all along for the 49ers is the re-up Ayuk this offseason, trade Deebo next offseason. You get one more year with them together, and I think it's the max you can ask for, and both contracts don't hit at the same time. I just think it makes too much sense. Ayuk's younger, going to age better than Deebo Samuel. We've seen how the kind of pounding he takes, and you could even use like Ayuk could sort of start playing more of the Z spot, and you can start scheming more things up for him and treating him more like a true number 1 as well, instead of sort of the backside wide receiver on a lot of plays. As far as the question, what's the lowest pick you'd take? I would say like pick 20, 17 or 20. If he gets traded in this draft, basically once, in fact, that pick 21 again, once the Dolphins are on the clock again, Ayuk's staying, as far as I'm concerned. And I doubt he gets moved, but maybe Kyle just loves Deebo so much, and maybe there's a little bit of that doghouse scent still on Ayuk for whatever reason. They didn't like him early on. If there's still something there where they're like, we don't trust him as much, and we're willing to take this and not pay him and go forward, I could see it. And that's kind of like the dark horse, like everyone's eyes pop out of their head move is like Ladd McConkey to the 49ers at 31. Everyone's like, oh my God, wait, what? What's going on right now?
He's a route runner, man. He's a route runner, man.
I love McConkey. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. But that, I mean, buckle up, because there's so much groupthink. We think we know what's going on, and it's going to be nuts, man. So I can't wait to see how the 49ers shock the hell out of us, and probably half the teams in the league shock the hell out of us 2 weeks from tonight.
I think if at pick 31, the 49ers do not select an offensive lineman, you are going to see backlash that is so heavy, because everything is you need lineman, but it goes back to need best player available. What's there? Can you identify a guy on the back end? Like, that is going to be the best part. And I, for one, I sign me up for the chaos. Let's do this, because no matter it, like, again, like when I asked John Lynch at the combine about best player available and need, he said, we just like drafting good football players, and we don't care about like what other people think of them in terms of value. And I'm just like, well, we kind of knew that, because there's many times where we're like, wait, that's a little bit early. Like even Aaron Banks, that's a little early. So I think at the same time, while we believe that we have a handle on what this team needs, and we do, but that doesn't mean that the team is going to approach it the way that we think they are. And I guarantee you, if they don't take a lineman at 31, the backlash is going to be so strong. I can't wait.
I can't wait for it either. By the way, good point in the chat. Xavier Worthy could be that McConkey, AD Mitchell, the Texas connection, Kyle's alma mater. There was some report, I don't even remember if it was substantial report or not, or where it came from, but I saw, he's been sniffing around the University of Texas a lot. Kyle always has one really insanely fast receiver on his roster too, but that he never uses.
Hi, Danny Gray.
Wouldn't that be like ultimate Kyle to draft Xavier Worthy, and then he's like the 4th wide receiver on the 49ers roster?
Sounds on brand.
All right, good stuff. Thanks everybody for joining us here on another episode of OT with BP. Seeing everybody jump in live, seeing a lot. We have 500 folks in here right now. This is fun. Appreciate Jason Aponte at Jason Aponte. Is it 2103 2301?
2103 _ yeah, like it's burner vibes. It's supposed to throw people off.
the numbers are some trash ass Yankees reference, right? Is that what it is?
No, 21 is Roberto. 21 is Roberto Clemente.
Oh, that's not
and,
trash. Okay.
And 3 is my favorite number. Allen Iverson, a lot of other great players that wore 3, not Babe Ruth. So yeah.
Okay, not Babe Ruth. All right. Yeah, I get down with that. So that's cool. Okay, I like the number that you have on there that you should have got rid of a long time ago. Appreciate you. And Sprint Right Option Pod, Steph Sanchez, Steph 49K. Steph, before you go, can you tell us what Nick Bosa is going to say about the offensive tackle the 49ers drafted pick 31?
Well, he better get ready to, go up against me in camp because I don't plan to miss it this time.
Dude, fantastic and topical, nailing it. I love that. For all the best Nick Bosa and 49ers coverage, go to the 49K pod and Steph 49K on Twitter. Steph, Jason, appreciate you joining me. Appreciate to everybody that jumping in the live chat as well. Make sure you subscribe to the new channel here. Croc and I are going to be live during the draft. First round on this channel, second round on Croc's channel. Probably come back on this channel. Of course, we're going to be doing Locked On 49ers every day, breaking down the prospects from the draft before, after, all year long. Peacock and Williamson NFL podcast, breaking down the entire league daily as well on the Locked On Podcast Network. So appreciate you all. Subscribe up, and we'll see you next time.